coverkillernation, the year of the return still's going on. Yeah, I know, I just talked about a return a couple days ago, but it's time for me to talk about another one. This one was 10 years in the making. Yeah, all sorts of bands are just coming out of the woodwork and deciding to release new albums. Bush is the Sea of Memories. Yeah, you can't really tell, but that's what that says. 10 years in the making, ever since 2001's Golden State. Now, after Golden State was released, there was a period of disbandment of the band between 2008 to 2010, and a lot of changes did occur whenever that all went down. First off, they were no longer with Atlantic Records. In fact, they're with a different record company right now, E1, I believe. Yes, indeed. Also, they lost two core members. They lost Nigel, which was one of the guitar players, and they also lost Dave Parsons. So this is going to be a completely different band, considering there's two different members out of the four. Not to mention, ever since then, we of course know that Gavin Rossdale has experimented with a new band entitled Institute and has also gone solo, both projects of which have received some success, but for the most part, extremely minimal. Now, whenever I read an article that was announcing that this album was coming out, it was being said that this was, and being touted as being potentially the heaviest Bush album yet. Which is a difficult thing for me to imagine, considering if you listen to some of the harder tracks from 16 Stone or even Razorblade Suitcase, you'll find that Bush was a heavy band to begin with. So it was going to be something where if they were going to maintain in the alternative / post-grunge genre, they really were going to have to go toward almost metal capacity in order to really achieve the goal of this being their hardest album to date. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff on here whenever you think about it. I mean, you take a look, it's 12 tracks long, and whenever you take a look in the book just tells the tale. I mean, it's something that's very simplistic and stripped down as compared to other releases where you see a lot of very random artwork, some very different things. What the fuck? Well, alright guys, I might as well just get right down to it and stop beating around the fucking bush. You're not going to be able to see whenever I hold this up, so I'm going to try to make it as close to the camera as possible. Can you see that name? I'm sure you can't. Bob Rock. Bob Rock. The band assassin himself, Bob Rock. Alright, let's get into this here. This album is not the heaviest album that Bush has ever put out. In fact, if anything, this is the most mainstream commercial album that they've ever put out. The one thing I really enjoyed about this band is that after 16 Stone, even though the songs that you heard off of Razorblade Suitcase and The Science of Things were pretty radio-friendly, these were still really good songs, and they had a simple glimmer of experimentation and uniqueness to it that you really didn't hear in the whole alternative field. It's something that whenever you hear it on the radio, it's something that you instantly recognize. It's distinct. This album doesn't have that. This album does still have a very, I guess, different effect to it, but it's not exactly the effect that you're thinking. This is almost like Bush is trying their damnedest to go commercial. It's like Bob Rock whispered into Gavin's ear, "Listen, Gavin, your career hasn't exactly gone very well over the past 10 years, aside from the fact that you were in film, aside from the fact that you released 2 albums, one with another band, one solo. Do people remember that? Do you hear Gavin Rossdale Wanderlust on the radio? No. Do you hear The Institute on the radio? Barely, if at all. Do you hear Bush's Golden State on the radio? No. But they should hear Bush on the radio. This is what we do. Just stick with me. Just stick with me. I'm the guy that made Metallica a bunch of pussies. Yeah, that's basically the extent of that conversation. I'm going to almost guarantee it. Because this album honestly put me to sleep. I couldn't believe it. Bush is one of those bands that regardless to what they did, regardless to how in which they subtly changed their sound, I was always behind it. I was always very willing and able to find beauty into this. Even in Golden State, which didn't sell very well. It only sold about 380,000 copies, as opposed to the platinum or multi-platinum statuses of the previous 3 albums. This is something that I don't see coming anywhere close to 380,000 copies, and if it does, many of them are going to be returned to the store. This album was just, it felt really dull. It felt uninspired. And as far as the heaviness is concerned, really stripped down, really kind of tried to hinder back to some of those things that made The Science of Things such a unique record, while mixing in some more commercial style riffing and everything like that. And Gavin honestly sounds like he's trying to do his best impersonation of every other alternative band out there. The uniqueness, the one-of-a-kind style is just gone. Does this mean that this change is bad? Well, actually, yes, it does. I'm all for experimentation, and I'm all for bands of the variety of, say, a harder edge Depeche Mode, or that are really trying to channel something along those lines within their music. But this is kind of a schizophrenic release, where in some droves it attempts to do that, it attempts to branch out, whereas in other moments it does nothing of the sort. It just really seems as though they're trying to pine toward the radio stations, that way they get their music played. Now, before you guys all have a hissy fit, I understand that the business of this business is to make money, just like in any business. But whenever it comes to fucking with people's sound, all you have to do is stare right at the production desk, and if you see the words Bob Rock, you understand exactly why your favorite band has all of a sudden gone down to the shithole. I gave Bob Rock credit earlier this year on the new 311 release. And Bob, all I gotta say is, you got lucky on that one. Fuck you on this one. This is an album that honestly could have been great. Whenever I read some of the lyrics, whenever I kind of started to see the story behind it, I had no pessimism. Even though they lost 2 core members, I had no pessimism. Even though Gavin was a very, very different man than he was 10 years ago whenever Golden State was released, I had no pessimism. This is not musical evolution. This does not resemble musical growth. This instead just reminds me of a band that was like, oh yeah, weren't we a band 10 years ago? Let's do that again, and let's try to make some money doing that. Well, you're going to make some money. I don't think you're going to make very much. I don't think you're going to be hearing some of these songs on the radio. Songs such as, I don't know, All Night Doctors, such as The Sound of Winter, such as She's a Stallion. That's just weird. The Heart of the Man. This just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Plain and simple. Bob Rock, you killed one of my favorite alternative bands. You killed my favorite Canadian band in Our Lady Peace. You killed Metallica. You killed Motley Crue, probably. You killed other bands. You worked with other bands that had no future, and you gave them a future, only to realize that they sucked, and then they left them. I don't know what's that. Fuck! God damn it! I didn't want to be this pissed off about a Bush record, but I am. Coverkiller Nation saying, all bands out there that are watching this, whether you be big time, small time, and becoming big time, I don't know. I don't know what your situation is. This is all I'm going to say. If you're in the alternative movement, if you're in the rock and roll movement, even if you're in the pop movement, if you want, definitely if you're in the metal movement, by the way, if you want a capable producer that's not going to make you sound like a big ball of fucking bullshit, call up Rick Rubin and say, hey asshole, I know you're busy, but the only person available on this list is Bob Rock, and fuck that shit!